think I'm recording. All right, I wanted to do a little follow-up on my experiments with CodeEngine and kind of, well, share with you guys a baseline that I set up for using or getting started with CodeEngine and Python functions that are hitting Domo APIs. Now, this is based off of some code that I adapted from Jace, code that I've been working on in my own libraries, DomoLibrary, which I'll link in the description below, and some ideas I've gotten from there. Just to kind of set us up for why you should watch this. One, I do think this handful of functions are going to help you build better code that's a little bit more robust, but even if that doesn't convince you, one of the opportunities that we have with CodeEngine is we have the ability to execute functions using something resembling a pseudo command. Now, what I mean by that is, if you run CodeEngine in, if you execute certain Domo provided get data functions in DDX or in the custom apps, they will use the authentication of the user who is running the app or who is running the function. And that's great if you're an admin, but for certain activities, like let's say get cards, you might want to just get the cards that you have access to, but there's a world where I might want to run this as an administrator and get a list of all of the cards that exist or all of the cards that I could have access to. And in order to do that, we need to pass a different set of credentials. And CodeEngine, I think, is one of the first tools in Domo that allows us to sudo as an admin without actually having access to the admin account object. And that's pretty powerful, right? Because in all the other places where I can access account objects, if I have access to it, I can print out the password and clear text if I know how. Whereas if I'm using CodeEngine for this, I don't necessarily get that right. So anyway, I hope that convinces you to kind of watch this video, but let's kind of step through it. All right, so I have a whole bunch of functions in here that I'm going to uncomment and kind of try to fly through so we're not here too long. But the first one in here is really the bread and butter of it all. I have a function called getAccount. It calls the CodeEngine.getAccount function, and all we pass to it is an account name. Now, when you are setting up CodeEngine functions, or if you're trying to copy paste this code out of GitHub, which I will share with you, the type is indicated. So the account name should be of type string, and the output is of type dictionary. So here I am, I have to set up, hey, I've got this function called getAccount. The input, wrong button, is of type text, and the output is going to be a object, and this is going to be the account object. Okay. Cool. Now, what are accounts? Over here, I have shared my account with this CodeEngine package. And I have an account called SUDO demo, which is just a test account, which is some person with like participant rights. And JW username of password authentication is my real admin account with admin privileges. You would probably use a service account instead of a real person, but here we are. Just to prove that it works though, I can say, hey, I have this function called getAccount. I have an account name, and hey, pro tip, pass a default value. So the default value for the test account is called test. On most days of the week, you wouldn't run this with test. You would just not provide the default account, but if you wanted to have the admin account, you would pass in sudo. Right, but I think I can run this. Okay, I think I can save. Now I can run this, and I can say, call the getAccount function, passing in test, and I return we return a Domo access token account type with these credentials, and you can screenshot this if you want, but it's just a dummy account. All right, the next thing I have set up is I have an exception, a custom exception class called CodeEngine request error that will allow me to throw an error if my requests don't return a response. This is by no means something that you have to do, but it's something that I like doing. Now, one thing that Domo unfortunately does not support in CodeEngine at the moment is it apparently does not support classes, which is kind of a bummer for more sophisticated code bases. But hopefully this shouldn't get too complex. But anyway, you can see here it's saying, oh yeah, your class function request error has a init function, and that's what I'm seeing. Bummer, that means I can't have multiple classes declared, but that's fine. The self object is going to be of type object, the message is going to be of type text, and we can move on. There's no output, I just use this to throw errors. All right. I have to do all of these functions all at once, but the gist of it is I have one function here. I don't need to print data anymore. I have one function whose job is to get the full auth session token. If you watch my channel, you know you can pass a username and password pair to this API, and it will give you a temporary session token, not too terribly dissimilar from like cookies when you log into the browser or via the browser. I am going to send my request to a wrapper function called getData. It's a post request. I'm passing this URL. I'm passing the Domo instance and this payload. And then if all works out, I should get a session token at the end of it. But if it doesn't, then I raise that error that no session was returned. So no session token was returned. Okay, let me go ahead and set up the parameters. Again, username is string, string, string. Okay, so do text, 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 save, save. The output of get full auth session token is just the string for this session token. So the output is the session token. It is of type string. Okay. This next function here is a little bit higher up, and what this function, if I can find the end of it, what this function will do is it will either return a header for a session token or an access token. If you recall, the session token, my username and password, authentication requires XDomo authentication on every API request. And if I want to use access token, which is set up under, where is that? Admin, security, access token, right? Those. That requires the header XDomo developer token. And again, I don't want to actually pass usernames and passwords and tokens in clear text. So the input value that you pass in is what is the account name, which again has to correspond to one of these aliases. What instance are you trying to authenticate against? And then it will either generate a session token based off of the username and password that has been extracted from the account. Here, see, we run get account, and then we extract some values. And then if I have a username and password, then I'm going to try to get a session token from that API we just talked about. And if I just have an access token, then I'll just return this header here. Super clean, super easy. So what parameters do I need to fill in? Let me save. Generate, okay, so the account name is of type string, the Domo instance is of type string, save, save, and the output is an object. This is a header object. I'm going to pass a default value for the account name. The default value is going to be test again. Then my default value for the Domo instance is going to be Domo community. Another really powerful thing about CodeEngine is if I pass a stored set of credentials that can hit another database, that's another Domo instance, right? This is a way that I can start, if I have multiple instances of Domo, here's some tooling that allows us to hit different instances. Cool. Let me just check and test that this works. So I want to generate an auth header for the test account, which should be an access token. So it should be XDomo developer token, I think. Having that nightmare. Am I actually recording audio? Yeah, okay. I hope it's not too quiet. I'm not wearing my headsets, but here, okay, we can see I have an Domo developer token, which I can now pass in my API requests. So how do I pass an API request? I indicated earlier that I have this wrapper function called getData. And I think this is the most intriguing part about this whole kit and caboodle. This is, I think, why you should go through the effort of trying to figure out how this little bit of boilerplate code works. So what getData will do, you pass in the URL, you pass your API request method, what instance do you want to hit, what account name do you want to get, what account do you want to get credentials information from, and then body headers, blah, blah, blah. Also a debug API function. So what will this do? The gist of it is it will construct properly formatted headers and properly formatted URLs to allow you to query the APIs. But the part I think that's most intriguing is that I can either, sorry, my scrolling is a little bit, okay. I can either use the requests.request library to hit my APIs, or I can use the CodeEngine.send request library to hit my APIs. And the reason why that's intriguing and important is because while CodeEngine send request is powerful, it does not allow you to impersonate another user. So you cannot use the SUDO element. You cannot send a request as admin. You can only send a request as yourself when you use the CodeEngine.send request. However, if I want to impersonate someone else, I can pass in an account name and the Domo instance I want to authenticate from, and it will extract that relevant information and pass it into my request headers. And so that's kind of happening up here. If I have a Domo instance and account name, then auth header is equal to generate auth header. That's the function we just looked at here. It will return my xdomo developer token and work that into the headers. And now I'm authenticating my URL request as an administrator, which again is something we cannot do with the CodeEngine send request. To just prove that this all works, I have a function called whoami, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It says, hey, whoever I'm authenticating as, just print out information about me. So, I'm going to go to get data. Let's pass in the correct parameters. So the URL is of type string, the method of type string, the Domo instance of type string, account name of type string, params is of type object, headers is of type object. I love how much clicking I get to do. The body is of type object, and debug API is of type Boolean. Debug API is a flag that I put on a lot of my functions that I write that allow me to say, hey, most days of the week, I don't need you to print stuff, but if stuff is going sideways, I want to have a flag that I can pass in that will print out this debugging information. So basically, am I constructing the body the right way? Is the URL looking the way it's supposed to, blah, blah, blah. That's what debug API flag does for me. And then the output of get data. Okay, so this is fun. The get data, CodeEngine expects the output to be typed, and it's very particular about the type that you send back. And to get around that, a lot of times you could say, oh, my type is object, which could be just about anything. But what if I have a list as a response? So you can imagine, what if I had an API that said I want to get data, and the data that I want to get is a list of pages or a list of users. Okay, well, get data, I can't send it as the type is list, because some days I might just say, ooh, my get data function should just get one user or get one role. So that in that case, it would be an object, not a list. So to work my way around that, I do this in DomoLibrary, which I'll link in which is a GitHub. It's a library that I posted in PyPy, but I will also include the link in the description below. What I did to work around this is So CodeEngine send request. Whatever you get back, wrap it inside of a dictionary where the key is called response, and then I have my response. And the same thing if I hit the request. If I use request, I can say give me the result back as a response.json wrapped in response. And again, this will allow me to make sure that I'm always returning an object that has at least one key, or definitely one key called response. That will work around that problem. Okay, and then who am I? Like I said, this is, I think the power of this approach is like once you set up all of these previous functions, I have a function called a root called who am I want to hit this API, I want to send a GET request to these. And then I just baked in basically all of the functionality that allows me to query like, oh, sometimes I can SUDO, sometimes I can't, and all of that shenanigans. String. Right, so I have really easy debugging tools in relatively short amount of time. And who am I? I know I wanted to always return an object. Uh, and it's the who am I object. Okay. And so here, again, I'm going to return res.response, right? Because I know that the response object is going to be a dictionary, and I just want the response out of that dictionary. To show you how quick and easy it is to set up your next function, I have a function called list roles. And again, I have the same three parameters, instance, account name, debug API. And then all I have to do is say return. This is the API that I want to hit. And I want to send a GET request. And like I can just copy paste every API that you want to get data from. You just copy paste this, and it's pretty straightforward. Cool. Let me make sure list rules works, and then we'll show you the demo, and then we'll call it a day. Cool. Please demo work the first time. A list of roles, oh, here's the example, should return a list of roles. Okay. Roles is a list of objects. Okay. Sweet. Let's see who am I work. So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to say I want to hit Domo community, and I want to use the test account debug API is false. Okay. So when I use the account name test, I throw an error. That's not at all what I wanted to see. I'm going to turn debugging on just to make sure I'm not making any dumb mistakes. And it immediately throws no kind of error. Love that. Love that. Let's try list roles real quick. Hey, get data. What is your output? Your output. And guys, I know my code works. This is annoying. All right, let's step through it. So if I call generate auth header, so if I run generate auth header for test using Domo community, now you're throwing an error. Fantastic. Let me make sure I don't have some weird spacing syntax shenanigans going on. Look at that. So because the spacing didn't happen to be right, it's throwing an error. Thank goodness I have an IDE that I can do some linting against. So let's see if who am I works now that we've got the proper linting. If you don't know what linting is, have a Google of it. If you're just getting started in your Python development days, half of the problems that you run into in CodeEngine is just formatting shenanigans. Okay, but anyway, I ran who am I, and I can see in my response that I'm running it using the account called displayname826, which is a test account that I own and have set up. If I run this again, this time using Domo community, and I think the sudo, it should say that I'm running as Jay Wilson, and here's his email, right? Because that's the person that I'm authenticating as. And so what I've just demonstrated here is we have a very flexible way of building out the list of root functions, or kind of like base API functions that I'm using, and I can really quickly build in this functionality that allows me to run as just Joe Blogs, whoever the person is running the function, or I can sudo as an administrator. I hope this is useful. Like I said, I'll put the links to the code and all of that in the description below. If you guys have any questions, come find me on Slack, and I'll catch you guys later.